So, part of the idea is that we're concerned that the affirmatives are making small changes, and a national space policy is an enunciation of our goals, that this is what we want to do. So even if you put, say something like Iran on there and they say no, that would amplify links to Israel, because the president and or Congress have said we want to engage in cooperation with them, right? So it's sort of a modifier of either establishing or adapting our space policy that we have now. The second reason to do it is that it could potentially allow the apps to do something broader. So you could do a floor ceiling type thing with it and say you establish a space policy including cooperating, which would allow you to do some of the treaty stuff and other things we talked about. The third thing is that there's it would limit the actors that the affirmative could do, and so it would eliminate sort of NASA or agency, because the policy has to come from the president and or Congress, and therefore there'd be a little bit more predictable negative ground. So I think overall, it helps both the affirmative and the negative. I think it sets up, we want to encourage the affirmative to do broader change, and this is one way to do that. There's contextual evidence about it, and we've done it before in the past with energy policy and climate policy. Those are the reasons to do it.
I think in the context of the governance thing, for instance, I think it provides a useful limit so that somebody doesn't just send one person to sit at a table that's on a discussion about governance somewhere.
Yeah.
It forces us to say this is now our policy to be this. There were definitely a bunch of articles in my early reading, don't have the cards on them in front of me, but there's a ton of articles that are Obama's approach was to be cooperation and Trump's approach is Space Force. That basically, without saying national space policy, I feel like to be T under governance, you would just send somebody to one of these meetings and call it a day. And I don't know where the next ground is then.
Didn't you say somewhere, and I can't find it, that established maybe wasn't great with national space policy?
But we have a national space policy, right? Not only the current iteration we have is the 2010 Obama, but the presidential directive, the four that Trump has done is also our space policy. So, you could still, we've had energy policies, and it doesn't mean that we haven't established an energy policy, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So I'm not saying you can't use that. I just was trying to give options for people to say.
Reestablish.
Yeah. But either way, it seems that.
I threw amend in mine.
Oh yeah.
We need work. We need work on
revise.
Yes.
revise. Sorry, I did amend first, then I said revise.
Okay.
We need work on those words.
Yeah. Agreed.
What did you say? Establish right there.
I like the focus on it, because what we were talking about yesterday with the difference between space cooperation and international space cooperation in terms of what the literature talks about, or international cooperation in space, the difference between those phrasing. Space policy, I think, attempts to address some of those same concerns, and potentially allows us for a more eloquent sentence, so that if you say space policy, then later on you don't have to use space as a modifier when you talk about something, if that makes sense. So
you don't have to space in every
yeah, exactly. You don't have to say space 18 times. So even if we don't think by itself it's a limiting, I think it potentially functions as an inclusive phrase that modifies in a way that helps limit later on phrases. And it is a thing, the Obama 2010 space policy. There's a ton of cards that are written after that. The directive since then,
If people are looking for the evidence, it was in the day one, or the first. It's not in a folder.
Top level.
What's that?
Sorry, top level of the draft.
Top level wording proposal 2 space policy.
Thank you.
If you were trying to find it. I would suggest that it's on there, but I'm not gonna ride or die on space policy. But I think it is good, especially that Hale evidence says that NASA can't create it; it can only be done by Congress and the President. Is what really pushed me over to definitively saying that we should do this. They're the ones who implement the space policy. They don't create the space policy.
makes sense to me. Just throw it out there before we move on. Hester did chat me that if we wanted a version of the resolution that was a broader but not a whole world, the phrase
Launching countries?
launching countries
Yeah. We just stumbled across
pops
that.
up in quite a few places. It's just the countries that have the ability to launch in outer space as opposed to the countries that.
There's a bunch of countries that are in space, they're spacefaring, because there was somebody had concerns yesterday about, oh my gosh, there's so many countries, but there really aren't that do launching. And the other, I'm not advocating this strongly, kind of putting my political capital elsewhere, but I will say this, the other benefit that launching countries get you is if that number changes this year, right, a country that hasn't currently done that were to do it, then they would then become on that list.
See, I don't love that.
Yeah, my issue
I don't
with,
love more countries possibly getting counted.
my
Yeah.
issue with
Like if Northwestern gives them a space, launch capability.
that
tough
is
to
not
have.
that it's like with additional countries is not that it's too many countries or too big, it's that it enables apps that have no DA. So like the ones that we went through it systematically, we're
Agreed.
like hate it, hate
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
hate it.
Australia.
Like those
Sure.
are launching
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah, it only works as
Australia.
a way to deal with the
Not a
list.
launching grab, yeah.
Well, Japan
If the
has.
resolution, if the resolution doesn't have something else built into it, yeah, agreed. I was doing my other work and saw that as a phrase, I'm like, oh, that's cool, I haven't seen that yet, as a distinction.
Okay.
Wait, Israel's a launching country too.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Russia, US, Japan, China. The European Space Agency
Yeah.
is considered one.
It is.
India, Israel, Iran, and North Korea.
She can take enough list if most of your launches fail.
North Korea.
Iran.
You really want it up any way you
Yeah.
can. Any way you can.
Yeah, anyway, slice it.
Until they stops.
You gotta be above a certain
So now
success
you got a
level.
TR.
T launch.
There you go.
Okay.
Sounds like it should be added. Got T now.
We've got kind of 5 things up here. Things are put together for us. What's that? Do I need to make it bigger?
I mean, it just seems like where we were at. I don't want to unilaterally decide, but
No, people can disagree with you.
yeah. Well, I just want to.
It's a lot of letters.
Yeah,
What's the point?
You can't have a little A without an A.
Choose your own adventure.
It's true.
That's interesting.
Where in the doc did you stick? Oh no, no.
It's under.
Yep.
I guess the first one is this was what was in the in the paper.
It was the broadest one in the paper. There were several that like human space flight as you mentioned.
Mhm.
And how did they modify it? So this is the how did they modify it? It was like
Let me see if I have that. I mean, then it would kind of go down to a number 2 because they modified it with countries in the area. So everyone had the China, India, Russia, and then they modified it with different areas. So the second one they had was on human / crewed / staffed spaceflight. The third one said beyond the Earth's orbit, so it listed where it was, but it didn't specify the areas of cooperation. The fourth was just broad about space activities, and then the fifth was a combination of where it occurs and what the cooperation is, plus the country. I think that would be that. Of the one that's there, yeah. It's cooperation, you know. Anytime I say co-op, I mean space co-op with countries,
But do we think,
but no area.
Or at least substantially.
I put some wording in there, I don't know. Or the question was off the word.
Revised so weird.
It's not established, but we have it.
Well, at least means that it's a floor ceiling.
Yes.
You could just say, you know, do a space policy requiring a
establish.
substantial increase in space cooperation, or something like that. You see what I'm saying? There are
Yeah.
two different ways you could do it. One doesn't have to be a floor ceiling.
Did we ever get a restrictive definition of international space cooperation to be a floor in that floor ceiling arrangement?
No,
So-
not really.
We have like.
So it's not what we're looking at.
no, the floor there's the cooperation.
I mean, I guess it is,
So why
it is a
didn't-
floor in a sense.
This
It's
is the
international
broad.
space
This is
cooperation.
the broad.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's just,
Uh,
yeah,
there
very
we
broad.
go.
I'm not advocating for it.
The
That's just
preposition
what-
in between the increase in its, I believe, requiring a substantial increase in
Oh, yeah.
its.
No, yeah.
Or requiring substantial increase in.
Yeah.
Well, the way
Shouldn't revise its national space policy already do that?
Well, the second "its" makes it doesn't make much sense, but grammatically to refer to either USFG or the first direct object to space policy.
Oh, yeah, the national space policy.
So the one I proposed was to do space policy, and then I had a comma, including at least offering a substantial increase. Now that had offer, but you could just put after space policy, comma, including a substantial increase, something like that. I think that was adapted from one of the previous ones. So the 1617 resolution said the United States federal government should establish a domestic climate policy, comma, including at least substantially increasing. I'm not saying we want to use that, but that's where I modeled that from. I need to look at these.
You need to
I
include at least.
have it on my computer.
And-
right?
Yeah, give me just a second.
Gotcha.
please. What else?
That was them.
And then the country names will obviously probably want to clean up or discuss, like the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation.
This might just be a small change, but for the second one, maybe USOG should revise its national space policy. Let me see, I have it. And it might actually doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, yeah, including an offer to at least. Does that make sense? It's like just including at least an offer, just reads a little. So like including an offer to.
But then the at least part is with all within the
Why don't we
offer.
put at least including an offer too?
Yeah, the at least has to be before offer.
Yeah, agreed.
We need a
Or else the
Or at least substantially.
Yeah, you're right. It makes sense. It reads funny, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, because object is an offer to substantially increase. Yeah.
otherwise the floor and the ceiling are all contained within the offer.
we need a position in like the first one between policy and requiring, because right now it reads as we should revise the policy which already requires, so like as if the policy
Yeah.
required a substantial increase.
To revise national space
So
policy
by
to require,
require.
yeah, to require or by
The other
require.
thing you could do is just to flip it, and so should, substantially increase its international space cooperation with one or more of the following through a revision of national space
Yeah.
policy, or at least with a revision of national space policy. I'm sorry, we say require, I might have just said that, but
The
we do
verb
say
work
that.
on revised?
No, that's right here.
See what I-
This is-
That's why it's in, like,
I see.
I'm gonna go with
That's
manifest.
much for like clarity too.
Yeah, make it
Manifest.
so, number two.
Yeah.
I'm still.
Okay, it just seems like we got pretty far into like, let's make this grammatically
Yeah.
perfect when we haven't.
Yeah, it seems like some people are fixing like commas and semicolons,
Yeah, I
and other
don't
people are on.
think we're there yet.
Let's put together what we want.
So the first one would be number one, and the first one that's written out would be an example of number one, and the second one that's written out would be example of number, 1 point or 1A.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I mean that's what I would think. The first one is not a floor ceiling. The second one is. Those are the big differences between the two.
What's the ceiling
National space policy.
on 1A? That's a ceiling?
No.
Yeah.
I thought that was a floor. Oh, I guess the offer is the floor. How's that a ceiling?
The spatial
can't
metaphor
lie,
breaks
I don't
down.
know. So you can't be
They're
like,
kind of forward than see
We're offering to go to space with you, and
can't do
also
terrorists.
setting up
Also,
Taiwan.
right,
You
okay.
can't do terrorists.
Yeah.
Spatial
Yeah.
metaphor, please.
Well, yeah. There's logical steps, not.
Okay, now we talked about two.
Well, and I don't wanna jump the gun or be that guy, but just, if I was interested in at least pitching an adversaries only version, is this where that would fall?
Oh, like just Russia, China, or Russia, China, India, or Russia,
China.
Iran?
It'd be Russia,
Just
China,
China,
Iran, I think.
Yeah.
No.
Can't be wrong, go back to you.
I'll throw that there, is that okay?
Yeah.
I'd also like to, we talked during the break, come back to a resolution that has us deploy space weapons. We can talk about that.
Okay.
Do we
I
really
thought-
have 5 votes to discuss that?
I thought,
I'll vote to
Wait on that.
discuss it.
Let's keep the train rolling on that. Thank you.
I'm confused, I thought when your pitch earlier, when you were talking about weaponization, was that there's no solvency advocate saying that we wanna cooperate to weaponize space. So do you just mean to
Right,
unilaterally
so-
weaponize
Yeah.
space?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hey, Pat.
Opposite
Here,
of
what is this one?
just checking.
So that would be like that is so. Establish a national space policy to cooperate with Russia in the areas of. And then if we're going to do a list, human space flight or whatever.
Okay.
I don't know where we landed on that, but that's what.
Well,
that is. Again, I'm not saying all these should be on there. It just seems to be the concepts that we were talking about.
I know, just it feels like the version of the list that we have at present, like we didn't get more specific yet than broad McBroad from like development, exploration, governance.
We're gonna have a weaponization wording, but
Okay.
we may or may not include that. So.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's, I just mean
Yeah, do we even have like
activities
do we have exploration or development work too?
from the high school topic,
Yeah, okay.
which is on the list to,
Yeah.
What is 2A?
It's the same as 1A, but with the in the areas of.
Yeah, and then there's a question on those ones too. What's the others too? Let's see what. Do we want a variant for either a 1B or a 2B? It's like with at least one or more of the following in terms of the countries, so that you could do.
I don't think the countries are set. I think this is just a template.
No, I know that the countries aren't set. I meant, do we want to allow you to work with Russia and China? I guess it says and or Russia and China, but a non-listed country, right? So you could increase your national space policy, work with China, but also invite,
No.
Okay, I agree. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not that.
But that's like multilateral space diplomacy is.
Okay, but like, if
Okay.
it was that we have a version of that
Yeah.
on the table.
Oh, okay, yeah.
All right.
Because you could do like a China-only topic, but at least China, right?
Reduce legal.
You know what I mean?
That's the.
With one.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I'm not like a big list, but I'm just saying, it's like working with
Nick Ryan
at least have to
topic.
do China.
Right.
You could add.
Nick,
I am not about China and the
Jackie, sounds like you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very, very minor assistance.
Oh, you're looking for my wording? I think you could do, legal barriers to, the one I had in the original document was reduce its legal barriers to international
On.
space cooperation.
And we said on was a little bit more specific.
Yeah, we said on probably, and then I think we said legal and or regulatory barriers might be a better phrasing.
Okay, so except I also don't know if we agree that it wouldn't be restrictions.
Well, I think that, yeah, it's work we would have. Yeah, legal barriers, restrictions.
Slash restrictions.
I think you could probably put in brackets restrictions next to legal and or regulatory.
Just remove that and here's the difference.
For a smaller version, I would maybe flip it around and say it should substantially increase its international space cooperation by removing its legal barriers to entry on, and then list countries.
Do you mind just starting over? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that was long. USFG should substantially increase its international space cooperation. You could either put with the countries there or wait to say with until the end, by removing its legal barriers to entry, which is a smaller version of the barriers section. That would just be like any of the trade-based restrictions.
Yeah, the other one.
It sounds like one app is probably just like remove all of them.
Yay.
For different countries though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
different countries is
Guam. What is it?
With one or more of the following.
yeah, and then you would list countries. But there are different types of legal barriers to entry. The governmental ones, there's like 3 different kinds.
Mhm.
Just the phrase removing its barriers seems to be
Should reduce, I think, is probably.
Yeah.
reduce or remove
reduce
at least like remove
At
Yeah.
least
one or more
one.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think so. Any of the ITAR stuff, either is like it should be reduced. It shouldn't just be abolished
Yeah,
entirely.
so-
It should be abolished.
No, I don't think anybody says that it should be abolished. It
Okay,
says that
then yeah,
those need
reduce it.
reformed.
Okay, so then you would just change removing to reducing, and then
Or reform would be the other word.
and then it would be one or more of its legal. The one thing that I said that would be different though between those two is legal barriers to entry instead of just any legal barrier.
Okay.
And then you could say and or regular and or like restrictions. I don't know what the second half of that was. I didn't do any of that stuff.
Can I paste another 3 that I was toying with, or would that be anarchy?
Sure, yeah.
What's the other one I was sort of toying with in that direction? The space seems a little redundant at the end, but I figured it's better than cooperation alone. Because the Wolf Amendment isn't just like tech, it's like NASA can't cooperate writ large, absent FBI approval. FBI/congressional approval, so.
Is it possible to do countries here?
You could do countries, like, I don't think that you have to do countries, but, I mean, it's certainly a possibility to do countries.
People who.
Esther, that's a funny face.
Oh, sorry. Which other? Which other? Okay.
is yours? Is this where we are, multilateral diplomacy?
Yeah. So the two that I had in the wording resolution. Well. I just sent them to you via chat. Because we're just doing like this is trying to get them all on one place.
And see where they need work.
Okay, cool.
What needs to be revisited. Will, do you mind moving your cursor real quick?
What's up? Oh, yeah. I can move my cursor.
I mean, honestly, the work that needs to be done with these is really reading through the work that Adrian and Danielle have done on governance and figuring out
You're stuck with it.
how to make that work.
That's when you put it on you.
Okay.
You're gonna say IADC.
Okay. I mean, to me, these. I guess I'm worried about the UN.
Well, yeah, no,
realm.
I agree. That's,
Yeah.
I'm saying that I think that the work that I've done
Okay.
is better to try to synthesize with the governance work and figure out the best version of that type of resolution.
Okay.
Because we were both trying to approach the same, resolve the same issues.
Okay.
And if governance, if the literature on governance is solid, it seems to be, then yeah, the differences with mine, other than the language, was multi-lat, bi-lat was a division of ground that doesn't exist, and UN bad was a no ground that isn't required of the But Adrian had already said hers was really broad, so. So Hester, what I'm hearing is that
It'd be either 4 or 5, or some way that 4 gets eaten by 5, I guess.
Yes, yes. I don't think that they'll end up being both of those on there. I mean, it'll be ultimately a resolutional wording that addresses these issues.
What does this need?
That's something we need to decide whether or not to vet. We need to take a look at development and exploration. Or do
Yeah.
we want governance by itself, or do we want governance with some sub-areas like planetary defense, weaponization, space station,
Yeah.
whatever?
Does governance, it would probably include like weaponization though, right? Like regulations on that, yeah.
I'm
okay.
just saying if we wanted to limit it to only a few of the things.
Oh, I
that
see, do
governance
global
can be.
space governance in one or more of the following areas, gotcha, yeah, then you could do, more limited version.
So
They didn't
I'm
just
still-
have more of the areas, exploration and development, and then figure out if there are any other, like, smaller sub-areas.
This is super tiny, but just the last 4 and 5 just should be and or the kind of match.
You want it to bend, or I just couldn't hear
He's
you.
saying add on to 5 and or, when you say
the
or
bottom.
global?
Thank you.
does it actually need the and or like 4B?
With a list, you don't, because it already says one or more of the following areas.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah.
I noticed.
So we didn't need the or in the first place.
Might be an and or, one and or more.
Choose and the first time.
You chose
or
one,
the
I'll
second
take
time.
more.
About, I just like this as a bigger ceiling, and I like this as a big ceiling. So if people do wanna remove legal barriers and allow something else, topic, if that's the sense, I wouldn't mind putting together one that was like remove barriers and then allow for cooperation over global space governance. Does that make sense? And then that's kind of a hot resolution here.
Yeah, the only thing I think is tricky is just that the barriers aren't necessarily to kind of like cooperating in the same kind of global governance forum. It's like they're more.
Well, because my only concern about the global space governance stuff, if you go back to
Does Mason give you Office 365?
Mm-hmm.
You should look at the Microsoft Teams. What is that? It's Microsoft's version of Slack. You can like edit files. Like, here, I'll show you.
the last
So,
one,
like tabs and stuff up here for offices. So like you can put the like our
like transparency and confidence building measures are part of
wiki.
global space governance.
And then some like other things that happen. Or like
No, I like that part for sure. I was just trying to figure out, 'cause it seems like the restrictions are more on just particular technologies or things with particular countries, and so trying to figure out a way to merge that and global governance just to make it kind of fit.
Are you trying to say that you think that removing wolf, like you just existence of wolf is a barrier to global governance because it screws up.
I'm trying to say,
It took me 4 years.
So I understand, I think I
I like-
understand where you're coming at.
I like the concept of
Yeah.
floor ceiling.
This summer we're like, let's try out teams.
Well, because when we don't do something that's multi-platform, it's just like a choice.
No,
of
we had to
it's not
wait
a legal.
If people are interested in
Peter
three
and
with
them got
remove
put
legal
off the
barriers and
set because they were
restrictions of
such
the floor,
dicks at the bit. Basically,
the only ceiling
anytime I
we've given this
suggested
floor
anything,
is
there would be a
international
fuck you
space
Jack.
cooperation.
So once they were gone, I
I
was
don't
like,
like
we're
that
doing
as a ceiling. I much prefer as a ceiling
Do you think the ceiling's
global
too
space governance.
Do you think the ceiling's too high for just international space cooperation? I mean, it's ill defined.
It's,
That's
Yeah.
what
it's
we're-
not as
we're
well
still
defined
working on. I
as
figured I'd mention it as
global space governance. I would prefer that we get rid of international space cooperation almost everywhere.
Okay. I guess I mean it really the only thing international space cooperation does. It is a very high ceiling. I think it's the biggest ceiling.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's all. Yeah. Global space governance is a relatively high ceiling as well, but smaller than international space cooperation. So, yeah.
It is a big ceiling, but like this UN card, which is picked up by McNeely stuff, picked up by the UN
It's
in a
more
bunch
well
of
defined.
places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's these 5 sort of like categories of actions.
It's nice to at least have a definition, whereas right now
Right.
we don't have a definition really. Yeah. For international space cooperation.
And that one's not long. So like the treaties, the agreements, regulations.
Yeah.
That one's not long.
Yeah. Because the only legwork international space cooperation is doing right now is just like, hey, this is an international topic.
Yeah.
And it's about space.
Yeah.
Like, you get your unilateral capital. That's all. Not much. Yeah. But
So
if
I
it's a
guess-
ceiling,
I guess.
Okay. Cooperation does mean that you have to be kind of in the, like, otherwise I think there's just a chance that the US announces, this is what we should do, and just kind of like tries to lead on governance,
Okay.
as opposed to.
well, yeah, like it should be in the resolution.
Forces,
Yeah.
or at least pretends you're gonna try to interact with the other people.
That was why, when I was using the phrase multilateral diplomacy in or for international space cooperation, it was with that idea in mind.
Because there are definitely a lot of people who say we should take the lead on global governance, which might not necessarily be in the most cooperative fashion.
Does revised national space policy serve a limiting function?
We haven't quite figured that out, I
It,
don't think.
it might,
Okay.
well,
We should, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know what's like topical if it's not there that wouldn't be topical with it there.
Sending diplomats to just go sit at a table. National space policy, and again, everybody should take a look at Patrick's cards.
Yeah.
National space policy says that we have it says it started with Eisenhower. There have been kind of smaller, lower level versions of it since, but it announced what our goals and intentions were in space, and the president does it.
Yeah.
Okay? Anything else, if we don't include it, I'm not saying it's perfect, but if we don't include it, means that sub-level agencies can be making these decisions. Small things like sending somebody to go sit at one of these UN meetings, veto the shit out of it and bounce, but call it cooperation.
Or a
is
tweet.
topical, right? Or a tweet.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
if it's a Trump tweet though,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's perfect,
Yeah.
but it's better than
No,
nothing.
Agreed. And also, especially with regards to international space cooperation, when we were doing that work, I was coming across like declarations at a conference.
Yeah.
If we just announce something, step outside in front of a mic.
I think especially if there's not another limiting function on like the actions taken, yeah, then it's like it's kind of necessary to provide
Yeah.
something there.
Yeah, I think if
Because
you're-
like, yeah, there's the agency co-op, you know, like NASA gets together with the Chinese space agency and like some astronauts hang out, but well, we want that, you know, no.
Right, like I think it would be different to say we're not going to defund the space station and
Yeah.
things like that, but I do think this might limit, like, you know, an app that says let's send one person to the space station
Yeah.
or something like that.
I think it limits beyond that too, so that, because that would not meet substantial or significant, I don't think, if we choose to include that, but also any kind of soft law, anything that is not binding law and publicly declared, I think. At least by my read of the evidence, that is true. I think that's, you're making a face, but.
I'm just thinking, I'm
Yeah.
not making a face, but I don't know what to do.
Not 100% for that.
I think it's debatable.
Jesus,
so.
sorry. I think it's debatable. I think because it's kind of guidelines and goals of our policy, I think soft law may still. But I do feel like it's more significant of a I mean, I was saying this in a conversation with others. it's kind of like the NPR, the Nuclear Posture Review, except that nobody gives a shit about space. Like, obviously, like, if we broke the NPR, there'd be a big deal. The problem is that space is not nearly as salient or as important to the rest of the world necessarily. But I do think it's kind of theoretically of that significance that if we altered or changed it, it makes the link a little bigger than it would otherwise. And I'm not 100% sure that it's like binding ironclad, but I think it's closer than if we didn't say it.
So I'll be real quick. I think it's just 1B with Iran in place of India.
Is there a version of 1 that also just is Russia and China?
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
be supportive of that as well.
You could probably just leave it all as like one CD instead of
Right, yeah.
6.
So that one is.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Is that where the only China one would be?
Well, I mean, they're all
Yeah.
counties. These are all the versions of one in different countries.
And then I think some people mentioned a China only topic.
Yeah,
Oh,
we did.
it's already on
We
there.
haven't done that yet,
Oh, we haven't done that yet. Okay.
but
I thought
I
I
don't,
missed it somewhere.
that's my question, is like, I'm okay with a bunch of country options. I'm not sure if 1 is the place where I wanna give people country options. Like, I might
you think it's too
prefer-
broad. No, I agree with you, definitely.
Where,
Oh,
what
so
other
we have-
alternative is there, I guess, to give these country options? Other than including them all with like 3, 4, 5.
I
2.
kinda think 5A with some countries I might like.
That's what I was about to
Yeah.
say, was I actually did have a country version in my,
Mm-hmm.
I think personally, I think 5A is way too damn big.
Like,
Yeah.
I think 5A needs to be, I don't like the stem of like international space cooperation, the area of, and I want more work on development and exploration, and I'm not sure global space governance scenario. That's already on the list. But like, once we tighten that up, that being where we list India, China, Russia, I like that better because I feel a lot more confident about what global space governance means. I feel more confident about national space policies in both, right?
Yeah, but I think if we're gonna make like 4 or 5 country options, and we want the areas to be fairly well defined, just because that could be otherwise quite large.
Say it again, though.
I think if we have, so we want well defined areas and then country options. If we're gonna do like list, like, you know, we've got our four possible countries. Yeah. But I think that's where we gotta vet our areas.
So there's a wording, this is weaponization, there's a wording in the paper that I sent out 2 days ago that has the US deploy space weapons. Reasons I think this is like cooperation adjacent. If we want the best debate about cooperation rather than merely ensuring the AF defends whatever new type of cooperation they're able to find a defense of, I think weaponization is actually a good way to accomplish that. We do a ton of cooperation now. That's kind of why we've been like banging our heads against a wall for 2 days. Obviously, weaponization doesn't directly increase cooperation. It actually imperils it. But that ensures that there is a debate about cooperation. The weaponization good, bad debate is a debate about the fundamental question of the topics we've been proposing, which is should we engage and how we should engage other countries in space. It shifts, admittedly, the locus of who defends that cooperation to a place that is, I think, more balanced. We also have yet to define international space cooperation to exclude really anything, which makes me suspicious of attempts to use that term to exclude a weaponization wording. But everything we've proposed fundamentally is a unilateral action that has then secondary effects on cooperation, whether that be making an offer, whether that means adopting a proposal for new governance strategies or whatever. Say no acts are possible on each existing resolution option, and all of those could theoretically have the effect of decreased net cooperation, which means that the idea that we should kind of exclude ballot options based on whether they kind of sound like cooperation, I don't think there's a clear enough bright line. The Constitution requires us to submit a ballot that corresponds to international.
Sorry, say that again. Why?
Huh? Why what? Why?
The part where, like, if it's not just because it doesn't seem like cooperation, we shouldn't exclude it.
Well, I don't think that there's enough of a hard bright line of what counts as international space cooperation.
Our definitions
in
are
order
bad
to,
right now.
Huh?
Our definitions are bad for international.
Yeah, I just don't know why we should axe something from being an option for the community to vote on because the term that we're using to axe it is incredibly poorly defined.
How is U.S. space weaponization absent a discussion of cooperation international?
Well, it's international because the place we put them is international territory, and no matter whether or not it's cooperative, a cooperative act directly, putting weapons in space directly impacts the future of our cooperation with other countries. The paper that I put up there lists 5 or 6 articles of the Outer Space Treaty that the AF would be at least likely required to violate. One of them is direct. I think it's Article 4, which is if we use the correct terms, the AF definitely violates a cooperative space treaty. So whether or not the AF is the AF is the side saying cooperation is good, we will be having debates about cooperation. They will be better debates about cooperation because they better match the division of ground that exists in the status quo. I think that and before we kind of did dive into whether or not I'm sympathetic to Adrian's concern that international space cooperation is maybe not perfect, but it probably doesn't mean putting weapons in space.
It could, if it was in cooperation with our allies, which is why I feel like we actually have options that already include this. I have no idea why we would jump in the direction of an option that is so far flung from most of the paper, but if somebody really wants to debate it, is already included in some of the options.
So I think the reason to make it by itself is actually the strict floor that it puts on the AF as a requirement. So I don't even think weaponization as an option that the debate could be about is even ideal compared to a lot of the other sub options that we have as space activities. The reason this is a really good floor is because it's and I was going to get to this in a second, it's really well defined, the action. Deploying space weapons is just there's good cards that defend what that is. And 2, it requires a very pronounced change from the status quo that ensures the negative can get back in the game kind of no matter what funky thing the app is doing. I think that that's important because I'm really concerned about the apps being able to find random scientists or members of space agencies proposing really weird types of space cooperation and the neg being stuck with the ozone DA. That's really, really frightening to me, having to stare down the prospect of debating that for a year. The Constitution requires us to submit options that are corresponding to the winning topic area. I did kind of card about what that word means, but I'm not going to bother you all with it. But in my humble opinion, it corresponds. Worst comes to worst, the debate corresponds to the topic paper. The topic paper said we should debate weaponization. This is the best way to do that, and I actually think it's the best way to debate cooperation, kind of given the constraints of what debate is. Last, and I kind of already talked about this, it's really, really good for debate. I don't know how DA only 2 and R's are going to work on a lot of these other resolutions. I think the app or the neg is really, really screwed when it comes to having to rely on counterplans that the app just has more time to prepare answers against. These counterplans are not as good as ESR, and the app, by the end of last year, had plenty of ways to beat that. this is an option that means the negative, always is able to engage the question of whether or not we should weaponize. Both teams can prepare that, and there's really not much the AF can do to run away from the fact that they, no matter how much they weaponize, whether it's one rocket or it's an entire BMD system or it's nukes or it's biological weapons, all of those things are just a large departure. There's like lots of charts in there, there's lots of cards. That chart does say that there's a lot of, it maps the level of cooperative effects to every level of weaponization. There's cards that say that there's various like ways the modular ways we define space weapons, from like where they're placed to what they can target, but there's some basics that like they have to be designed or modified to have a weaponized potential. That means like you can't say you can't put any satellites in space and call it weaponization because that thing doesn't have an intentional specific modification to cause damage. But there will be T debates, and that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's my pitch. Sorry for being preachy, but I think that it is really important to include this. And if the community thinks it's not what they voted for, they can vote against it again.
Why not just do you're basically like, we're the opposite of it. Ipso facto, there'd be cooperation. So why not just do US should unilaterally do stuff with space, which would include that, and then also go to Mars.
Because the reason this is important is not that weapons are the coolest thing ever to talk about. The reason this is important is because there's a requirement. There's like a thing that's different that the AF has to do.
Well, but if the problem is cooperations now, then the AF could go to Mars themselves.
Well, I think weaponization, though, I guess maybe you meet a bit of that concern. Weaponization is distinctly international, whereas I think unilateral colonization efforts are not international, right?
I think that there's like a lot of implications
T-international.
substantiated by evidence on the effects of weaponization on how we cooperate.
There's also no way that if this isn't the floor, people are going to read this app. Everyone will read the ISS app, and they'll be right to do so in the app every time.
Yeah, buy one more seat on the way to the ISS. I found this article that would be topical on the governance thing. That's like, we should propose a new framework for how we mine helium-3 on the moon. Like, there's just like so many of those proposals. Like Google Suite.
So what was the point that everybody would read ISS?
There should be a floor that makes you defend Facebook militarization if it's on its own. And if you have the choice to do it and it's topical, people won't choose to do it. It's your strategic interest.
It's a little bit of a counterintuitive argument. It's basically the app that we're proposing with this resolution is one that nobody wants to debate, so if we give them an option to debate something else, they'll choose something else. It's a little nuanced.
And it's not like the app is screwed. Like, there's lots of stuff I put in there. Actually, if you date restrict the cards, I actually think the app is a little bit better. The like weaponization inevitable is like a great club the app has to get rid of a lot of these DAs. Like, are we going to debate weaponization inevitable? Yes, no, on anything? Like, these are good debates to have. These are debates the paper recommends.
What's the ISS app that you're worried about?
I'm concerned about under a different topic, like a governance topic, for example, the affirmative that's just like codify the SQO, we won't leave the ISS.
I'm saying
like
if the SQO is cooperation, then it seems like the logical extension of this resolution would be the United States should unilaterally do stuff in space, which would include civil and military, right?
I think there's specific benefits of weaponization beyond the fact that it is initially unilateral, that stem from the fact that it requires a predictable and controversial change to the status quo. I think that is I think there's other benefits. I personally like talking about weapons, and that's a benefit to me, but like, I think that its singular universal appeal is the fact that the neg's got something big to say all the time.
There are a large section of the community that doesn't want to just debate militarization.
Then they should vote against this, like, if they want to.
But I'm just saying, I try to give them all framework to make it an option.
And I guess that is just a concern I raised when we kind of talked to this. I mean, I don't know how to quantify it, what percentage of the, like, I'm trying to think of a resolution that maybe made the app move this far right in kind of my memory, and I can't really think of one. I mean, you may kind of have it in the back of your mind, or folks may kind of back in mind that like KAFs will move kind of far away from the topic. The cooperation ones, I mean, I guess it depends how you measure far away. I think a lot more teams are going to get a lot closer to that. I don't know that very many, if any, teams will get very close at all defending militarization or weapons.
I also feel like before we jump away from, so like, yeah, I agree, weaponization would be interesting and good to debate. Before we do that, we need to win the argument that it is impossible to debate any of the current resolutions I agree with you that we haven't found a good limiting definition on international cooperation or international space cooperation, which is why we spent the last day and a half trying to find other ways to limit it. And I think that those are fruitful opportunities, and also I think that we're getting close to something that is potentially debatable. And so I am uncertain that all of the work that has been done is certainly going to result in a resolution that is just impossible for the affirmative. Or the negative.
Yeah, I guess one thing I want to say too is that it's like our student rep wrote the paper, and so he's close to the ground on debating next year, and he's clearly concerned about some of these other things. If, as a ballot option, I would not vote for it probably, but it seems like giving different options to the community, I think, might be useful. I don't know if this is the exact wording or things like that, but it seems like that forcing the app, there might be a constituency that's interested in forcing the app to be a little more concrete and specific about the things that they defend. We might formulate other resolutions. This is probably the best in that regard at the moment.
Other than maybe some students in the room, what constituency did you poll that supported this?
I've received back channels from a few people that said that they like it. I mean, I can't say that I have spoken to.
Because I didn't know this was even a thing until yesterday. Like, did you vet this with other people?
Well, I sent the topic committee an email about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so
that said you were writing a wording paper that was just going to advocate that. Like, I knew you said you had some concerns. I don't remember it being, hey, I'm going to write something.
no, I used the phrase weaponization. I sent that out, and Herndon did say put on the ballot if I got cards about it. But that's a group decision. That's not just me and him.
This is a policy the Trump administration won't articulate because they think it's a terrible idea, and it's Trump. There are no weapons the U.S. has that are ready to deploy in space on a timeline of, I would guess, at least 5 years, right? Because we've been hedging on the R&D, and the resolution, it would be anti-topical under everything else that's on the slate.
Someone earlier said an opposite thing, to be fair.
That it would be topical?
Mm-hmm.
I know, I don't know, it's not corporation.
I don't know if it's true or not. There was an initial premise that was like, if this is a form of cooperation, then we can do it under a different res.
I thought
like,
the arms
can't
control side was.
Yeah, the reduced militarization,
Okay.
not
We
the
have
increased
agreement to
militarization.
not
You
do
could
it.
probably deploy some stuff with Japan. Like, why?
If you don't country limit it, yeah.
Oh yeah, the big
I mean,
one.
yeah, not to mention Danielle's aliens idea. There's definitely some collaborative efforts that we Yes.
I guess the concern you're speaking to a little bit is just like neg prep though and neg ground focus, right? Like not just education about space and all.
I think that that's the thing. Is like it has a few like the incentive structure of it. I think is maybe a little bit more balanced than just like the things you got to do. Make it so both sides kind of reliably have something to say in the debate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it resolves like two concerns that I have about the rest of the res slate, which is one, like say no and conditions AFs that I think will be kind of difficult to debate, and just like second, broad terms that mean a lot, like it seems like global space governance, national space policy, like they remind me a lot of like domestic climate policy, and like just like the way that debate played out on that topic was just like a little bit of a free-for-all, especially once we got to Monday at the NDT. And I mean, I think that's the utility of this topic being smaller, generating a lot of link uniqueness and good ground for the NAG.
Ground for the app.
Absolutely, yeah. The argument that space, our adversaries are weaponizing to the point where we have no choice but to correspondingly weaponize. That's a good literature base.
Not to mention, if you build them right, you definitely solve all
Oh
the
yeah, that's the last thing I
dissatisfaction.
forgot to say, is that there's also a built-in incentive not to read tiny, stupid weapon apps, because then you'll weaponize but also lose the war. So like, you gotta weaponize, and you probably also want to.
We're ready to have one app.
Okay.
No,
Am I correct, like 0 chaos, 0 soft left that property?
I mean, soft left apps by 0, plenty of gay apps.
I mean,
We got clamless apps.
I can't remember the app ever having to do something this.
The topical chaos.
I did explain during the break that you can focus the weapons on the U.S. as a way to end the world as we know it, so I think there's a really good pessimist staff version of it.
Is that lit? Any cards on that?
We began with, are there K-apps? And you said, is there evidence? And I just said, is there evidence?
I will say this like.
Okay,
So, who wants more work done on it? Because I think there are two barriers here. One, who would like to see more work done on it? and like more of your time spent, and then two, there are some words that I would like to find to get like those like second hurdle, but I'm getting the sense that some people are like it's too far removed from the paper. I for one like that weaponization is part of, I think almost every resolution over there you can write a weapons aff if you want to, pretty much.
We could straw poll, like,
I
if people are
sent
just
that,
like.
I sent that poll out already to
Oh.
the people. It's the one that I emailed people in the
Yeah. All right.
resolution. You're
Okay.
good.
Topic committee voting.
Just let me know if you have it when you voted. Miles, do you have it?
I did. I voted.
Oh, yep, I can tell you did.
It went up by what?
Did you vote? Did you vote?
I know.
Did you vote? Did you vote? Will, did you vote?
Yep.
Vote. Vote.
This site is new to me. Is there a way to see the results? Or is
There is, but it won't tell me who voted, just the total count. So,
Is it a way for us to do it?
yeah, I can show you the results.
No, Herndon is the only one. He'll just tell us. We'll trust Herndon on all votes.
Herndon/Creed.
Hashtag thanks Herndon.
Yeah, Putin wins on a
I've not
9-0.
voted in it as a 4-4 on a let's write a good
I mean, I'm
weaponization
a
resolution.
conditional yes.
A conditional
About
yes?
that, as in like, I don't want it to take time away from it, I think we've done a lot of work to do on resolution with the slate that we have, and so if there's just one or two folks who wanna take it, but I don't know that it's a good use of resources for half of this room to be working on writing a quote, good weaponization resolution. I don't know if people jive with that or not, but that was my, otherwise I'm no.
I would agree with that too. Yeah, we don't want to like keep groups on.
So two of my yeses are conditional
No,
yeses?
no, just yeah, it just makes sense. Like I think on a bunch of the stuff we have a lot of things to divide up and focusing our efforts would be good. I just want to make comment. But I'm in favor of like letting Miles and like Miles wants get on the ballot and like I think he can present the best option to us and then it's like I think the community can decide if that's something they're interested in voting for. He's our student rep. I don't know. He wrote a res and like thinks it's a good option.
Okay. We have a hefty to-do list up there of the resolutions we do have.
Do you know this means
Some of these are easy. Is there anything other than these 8?
What, the to-do list?
Yeah, this to-do list was the thing that we came through as people were talking about as we complained about the resolutions, things that needed work to make them better. Yeah, Rebecca.
I'm not wedded to like multilateral space diplomacy, but maybe just being real certain about multilateral diplomacy and international space cooperation and just ways that can prevent the opposite. So I still have that just kind of concern space command after.
Oh, I agree. I was prepared to shift my
gotcha.
work efforts toward global space governance.
Gotcha.
Yes.
I thought I heard something like that, but then I saw it still up there, so I was like, let me make sure.
And that's why I was,
I, as currently written, I would actually vote against 4A and 4B because I think improving 5A and 5B encompasses those without having to work with UN stuff.
Yeah.
That's
That's
what
what
I
I
heard
want-
from
I wanna hear
Hester,
from
although
those that
he's
have
like
that.
most likely to say I'll vote against.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, which is I think it's like global governance, hammering that out a little bit.
Does anyone want to spend our time fixing this UN stuff, figuring out what the app and the neck ground looks like for 4A and 4B, or would we rather spend our time on like the other things?
Other things?
Yeah, I wanted to shift my focus to 5A.
So you're okay with
and
that?
B.
'Cause you're the-
Yeah, absolutely. That was.
I mean, you recommend that?
Yeah,
Okay. I just want to make sure. I mean,
Yes,
I'm
completely.
agnostic.
Oh, One thing I'll add, we did not put up that I law, which had the 3 short specific, so the treaties version of the topic. We could copy paste that one in. We could just drop old people if there's any interest in that too.
Just
Sure.
No, we'll just specify the 3 or 4 treaties that you have to specifically
Specifically ratify or
no,
agree
no,
to, commit to.
Yes.
what is
yeah.
it, Adrian?
Put a copy of it in there so we can see it. So
Okay.
we're
Will,
managing
would
a
you
lot of
put a
fucking
copy?
I can put that in there.
documents
Yeah. There we go. I'll just edit at the end here. There we go. That's the basic.
Can we bullet point, like, do bullet points for those treaties? Instead
Oh,
of,
yeah, you can put the bullet point.
it would make life easier.
Yeah, turn it into a bullet point. It's fast. Oh, yeah, that's the wrong spot, but
Is it?
yeah. That's why I did semicolons, because there's a comma in the treaty on the prevention of the placement of weapons in outer space, comma, the threat or use of force against outer space objects.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah. It's one terribly named treaty.
So basically it's just to ratify one of these 3 treaties resolution?
Well, there are 2 agreements, 1 treaty. But there could be others we could search
I thought
for.
you said there's 3.
Yeah, there's 3.
Just that you said there are 5 total.
No, so we could there are a couple other possibilities, but people might be like, no, we hate treaties, and I would just be like, cool, I'm not going to cut any more cards in there. Or someone else might be like, hey, I love this, I'll cut some cards in it. I don't know. It was, when I was looking at ways to limit the topic, this was kind of like similar impulse, which is just, people loved the treaties topic. Everyone I talked to was like, yeah, it's the best topic ever. I missed it. And it's like focused negative preparation. These are pretty, there's a lot of stuff going on, so they're kind of large. Consent to be bound addresses some of the counter plan concerns with CEAs, but I'm not wedded to this. It's just like a concept for a smaller resolution. Smaller as in more
The
focused.
treaties romanticism was a lot about the particular treaties.
Yeah, for sure.
Not
Yeah. Okay.
about any of the ones that are on that list.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah.
And that we had a bush.
And there were
right, from
different
Clinton to
words.
Bush.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was ratify and implement and import, and you had to
And it was
actually follow through.
one time when the debate community was actually debating everything every political science professor was writing about
Okay.
because the Bush administration was doing it.
Right, there was
Okay,
a
yeah.
big debate about treaties happening at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that's terrible, I just don't know very much about them, and I was getting ready for my own conversation when you were presenting your stuff, so I would need to read a little bit more before I could even say, yeah, I think we should do more.
More about the quality of each agreement or whatever.
Yeah.
Quality of the agreement and the beginning of the stem, I'm not down with consent to
Yeah.
be bound by.
Okay. Yeah, that's just what the kids do these days whenever they read a treaties app. So.
It's tough. I want to do some more reading on it as well because my only
No, I
reading
know
so
there
far
are
is those,
there are terms, dude. It's defined. It's well defined, but
This is where the global governance thing is actually pretty useful. Now, granted, it was the tilt of the literature I was reading, but they were all about how those are the versions that China and Russia have been pushing.
Yeah, yeah,
The US
exactly.
has not been there, and we need to be.
Yeah.
So it'd be more like present an alternative to those, but
Yeah, that's what this.
I would
that's what I'm
vote
struggling
against
with.
the treaty.
Yeah, right.
Version.
oh,
Yeah, well, that one, and the Europe one is also the one where the US backed out and said, we'll come up
Yeah.
with our own version, and then
Yeah.
didn't. I like the idea, though, that they have the US work in those areas, or do something in those areas. So,
I think,
that's why I like global space
out of
government.
respect for Will's work, et cetera, with anyone else.
Oh, I didn't do that much work on it. To be honest.
Well, but
Yeah.
Adrian's
I mean,
asking
it's-
for
It's
additional work.
it's 3
more
hours.
time.
I don't want to do 6 more hours if people are
Would you vote for a treaties version of the resolution?
I don't know. I'm saying I don't know enough
That's
about this one
perfect.
yet.
Switching
I don't know
to
about those treaties.
I don't know.
I've seen them
I'm
in
going to stay up all
passing.
night writing
Okay.
and have to make brief
So,
areas.
I'm super excited about the moon.
I'm in the same boat. I don't know.
Okay, so
Yeah, that was
we
like
got
proper
before we
right,
decide?
so it's not just the moon.
Okay.
Are there other treaties that you think would be relevant? that are
Yeah, I mean there are a
relevant?
couple others. Those were the 3 that made the most sense, that have the most literature. They're the most salient.
Just
at
say
the moment,
3
but-
apps just seems.
3 is small.
There's nothing
Yeah,
a
but
little
like
more than
5.
we also have an escape hatch, add more treaties. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay, Will, I got 4 topic voting members denied, they would like to read more about these treaties
yeah.
before voting solidly
Yeah, I would
against
say
them.
that you would want 5.
Yeah, 5 exactly. Yeah, 5 is like by the minimum 4 or 5.
Does
but-
consent to be bound by mean you actually have to cooperate?
Well, the treaties themselves are all like have multilateral provisions, though. Yeah.
That make them do what?
Well, so
Sit
the
at a table or
no, they're more than that. I mean, like
joint verification?
yeah, the first
rules?
one's a verifiable binding agreement on space weaponization. It's probably stronger than most of the weaponization apps are actually going to be this year.
PWG is actually not verifiable. It doesn't have a verification mechanism, which is the U.S.'s biggest gripe. So
Well, yeah, debatably verifiable.
those were the cards that I included in the next section of that.
We want to have an agreement on this and talk
The
later.
CTB team
Well,
did
that-
some ASAP testing.
Yeah.
We throw that in there.
Yes.
Some background
ASAP
work.
test. Oh, that's true. Then the treaties topic's back. Ratify and implement CTB team. Are you on board then, Herndon?
Then I'm on board.
All right, throw it up there.
I will always vote for
You always
CTB
vote for the
team
CTB.
in any topic.
That's true every time. So, yeah.
You can mark my words on that.
Yeah.
Okay, back to this.
Yeah.
Revise the national space policy, figuring out the actual country names, and a list of countries. It looks like our list is pretty small: China, Russia, India, and Iran.
There are 5 we can list and then 100 that people.
Seems like this was pretty significant. The list of activities that was to go in here.
There's like
I understand that we're the biggest
right?
obstacle to that is, but like.
Nick and Jack, you want help with fixing some of the?
Yeah, I definitely would help. Like, if somebody else should definitely help with that.
Okay. Anyone want to see legal regulatory barriers resolutions? Willing to help them with that?
Yeah, I'll help.
Anybody else? About the lists or the country names or?
I'm happy to do country names. That would be pretty easy. But then I can also work on list of activities.
That's just like, come on.
Yeah,
No, I know, that's, yeah,
Islamic
yeah.
Republic of
That's like 5
Iran,
seconds, but
We could do that in 5 seconds.
China, Russia
Yeah, yeah.
Federation.
Okay,
Yeah.
it sounds
But I'll
like
do-
Danielle already did stuff.
Danielle will send
Okay,
these
yeah,
out.
there we go. But I'll do list of activities, and I can
Okay.
do
With
was it
each of them.
exploration and development?
Well, we have, that was
Oh, it's
further
different.
down here, we have those.
Well, we have those, though somebody should take like a
Yeah.
slightly longer look at them. Those
Yeah.
are just a pile of
Sure.
back files,
Yeah.
as far as I know.
I can do that too.
Yeah, the
I
big,
eyeballed and I remember Jeff Lundine's work from, because I was at the GDI on that one, but.
Yeah. There's some like old D-Hype stuff. There's a bunch of old stuff on that.
one thing to resolve in
together.
exploration, the limiter that people try to push is exploration requires people, which would exclude a lot of space science. So science something as a potential category, something needs to be looked at too.
Do you want to jump in on
The phrase
activities?
exploration
I have
and
another one
use-
Oh, you're working on something else? Okay. Yeah.
One I'm interested in.
Exploration and use is what I was finding a lot, or use and exploration, like the way the treaty refers to it.
Oh yeah, use
of space.
use of space. That's true. Some do say use.
Yeah.
So.
I think I think the Outer Space Treaty uses that phrase.
Oh yeah, Ern, did you wanna add, to the list, like where?
Oh, yeah.
We got a pile of mesosphere cards and other things like that in the high school T stuff too. Great. I'm not saying somebody shouldn't, I'm saying
Yeah.
that's a place to
There's
start.
also some outer space cards too, in the original Trinity stuff. That's another one. Like,
I remember when
Okay,
we do the where stuff. None of these resolutions depend upon.
no, but the one is you want to limit terrestrial.
I'll do
In some
this.
ways you could. Like, it's
Although we'll take some help.
like the most broad, like China only one. You go out where just because otherwise, like, we're gonna get together in Makabu Gotlands.
What else?
We're gonna have a military meeting. You know what I mean? Stuff
I'd be up for
like
working on,
talk about space exploration.
revising
It's like
MSP.
you can obviously count
Oh,
on
cool.
it's like non-space, but then it's like, you can. There's an app. That, you know.
I can work out of where.
Okay.
Wait, so we have the list of activities and the exploration development things.
Right.
Is everybody understanding that those are kind of different, that the activities was like maybe smaller things like planetary defense, weaponization, whatever, and littler things?
Yeah.
Okay. So that we still need somebody
national space policy is now.
And Brian,
This
just
is
so
gonna be
you
in a
don't
lot
get
of-
caught off guard again, I have started doing verb work, so
Oh, perfect, yeah.
we can both do that. The actual verb revise, you can throw me on there.
This?
Yeah.
Rhetorical question.
There was a request. Miles said he would send just one or two of those out. What else are we missing? That it? Okay. Cool. I'll leave it to do this there. By the way, I have pizza coming at 6. Should be more than enough to feed everyone. It's, I hope, I don't know, 8 larges.
Where'd you get pizza from?
Mellow mushroom.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, nice.
But no, if you're one of those people that has to eat a lot of meat on your pizza, I tend to not.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of meat on your pizza. I did get 2 cherry pizzas, but the rest were just vegetables.
They have good vegetable pizza too.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah. That's what I was thinking.
So we're on research break to vet these now.
Yeah, let's work on this till, what, 5, okay? 45 minutes?
Sure.
Because there's a couple of reading assignments in there too.